Are they actually going to pay attention to that little logo? Their information is coming from such a multiplicity of sources. You know, your face meets face, and you're getting stuff from Facebook. This kid, she's on, are you on Facebook right now? No? Okay. She's getting stuff from Facebook, and she's getting stuff on the radio, she's getting stuff on the television, she's getting stuff on the blogs, and so on and so on and so forth. So even if you would create that ranking, they're still getting information from a lot of different sources. From my point of view as a teacher of freshmen, the most long-term solution is to work on their critical thinking skills, because they're going to land on those sites. No matter what effort you make, they're going to land at sites that are not reliable. And so I think the long-term solution is that they have to develop their critical thinking skills so they land on the site and they ask questions about the site. So you're to talk about creating a conduit between yourself, you know, I assume a two-way conduit between yourself and K through 12. That, I think, in the final analysis, when they get to be in freshmen, they haven't had that foundation. I can't do much with them in 15 weeks.
I think you're exactly right, because if we were to establish some kind of authority to rank sites, you know that the other side would build their own little institutional authority that would go through and slap labels on global warming denial sites and anti-vaxxer sites and say that they're wonderful and we got back to square one. So you're exactly right, that critical thinking is the thing we have to get across to people. I think that's one of the other things we do with blogging is, when, you know, for instance, when we write up a description of a paper, you don't just sit there and describe the contents of the paper, you don't recite the details and facts of the paper. What we do is we criticize, we say, okay, here's what this means, here's where I think it's going wrong, here's the difficulties in this paper. And reading our summaries, we would hope, is part of the process of training them to think about what makes a good paper. And ultimately, that's what we get down to, is everybody has to make their own assessments, as scary as it is.
Desiree, you have a certain amount of experience dealing with unreliable sources, yes?
Which one are you talking about?
We were talking about one side, I don't remember what the topic was, but you've interviewed people who are...
Oh, the Gerson diet.
Yes!
Okay. The show, I do deal with speaking to experts in skeptical fields and scientific fields, but occasionally I also have guests on that are the opposite of that. One of the founders of the Gerson diet, actually the son of the founder I had on the show, and it's quite an extensive therapy, and but part of it is coffee edibles, if anybody's
For curing cancer.
for curing cancer. So I had him on, and I think, again, I'm not a scientist, but there's a certain amount of critical analysis that you can employ. And if we could teach people that part of it, that would be very helpful, because just asking questions like, okay, so what detoxifies you? What toxins? Even that puts people on the defensive a lot bit. And then if they can get to the point where they can tell you what toxins, you can say, well, what proof do you have that those toxins actually adversely affect you? And you can hear them squirm. So,
Do you like that sound?
I love
That's an example. Training by example, showing people this is how you dissect these points. You ask difficult questions that they make them squirm.
And the whole show is based on that. It's just a layperson asking questions that I hope other people would ask.
Two things I wanted to comment on. One was this earlier comment about that people are going to land on unreliable websites anyway. But that is the case with books or magazines or whatever. I mean, we can't stop people from reading bad books. I mean, that has always been the case. That's not a web issue. But I guess here is a case where, to a certain degree, we are dealing with building a brand name. And that takes time. So for example, I mean, if you think about movies, I mean, like Pixar, I mean, it didn't come out sort of like now, but I mean, if you think about a Pixar film, you go like, okay, well, there is some reliability that has built into it. So to a certain degree, I mean, with that logo aspect, even though there may be competing organizations that may, let's say, for example, climate denialists, they may build one. But I think within the science community, if we do have or do get some sort of logo or some brand, where you have to build reliability over a period of time. It won't be something, I don't think there will be shortcuts in this one, if you really want to build up on that. And if it's a 2 or 3 year plan, and I think one example is the research logging, for example, the lower that, okay, you know, what would you expect from there? Now, not everybody may go to that, but I think if we can think about a plan over 2, 3 years to build a brand, to build a reliability, sure, people will go to some other places, but we want to have a broader net, and as broader as we can get. We're not going to get everyone, but as broad as we can get. So I think
There are dangers in that too. I mean, if you just look at the Pixar name, you might end up going to see Cars. There's nobody who's rational about everything. So if we are training people to trust individuals, they may or may not appropriately generalize that to whatever that individual is talking about. We're talking.
But couldn't your panel all be the next Malcolm Gladwell of blogging and broadcasting? Malcolm Gladwell has a terrific reputation. He alters down that people generally know that he belongs. I mean, do you see that as possible?
There's one thing that's holding us back from that is, depending on who you Google, if you Google the names of the bloggers that are blogging this stuff, 25–35% of what you'll find is bloggers fighting with each other, who otherwise really have the same, more or less objectives.
But I don't think that's a problem, because it's the fighting among each other that helps teach people critical thinking. That's how they understand the argument.
That's true.
Or it'll turn them off completely.
It may turn
And
them off.
they'll just say these people are insane. These people just can't talk to each other, and what positive gain is there from that? I mean, there has to be a point at which, we really try and take a positive face and put a united positive front out to the public in some way. I mean, I don't know exactly how that could be achieved, but it just, to think that, we do argue, just like, all scientists disagree about things and have arguments in the literature, but that's not something that goes over really well when people just, want to hear something from the media.
Maybe that's what we're going to train people to do, is accept the fact that fighting is fun.
Well, there is
People
a
are
pattern.
monkeys, and monkeys
Oh, yes.
are bad at being trained. It's simple.
There's a pattern emerging here, though, and that is that we have 2 different strategies emerging here. One of them is teaching critical thinking skills and getting people so that the trust part is something that they learn to develop. They learn to know what to trust. And the other is just an easy marker. When you go to, I'm going to get a Google page, I want the Google page to be a higher percentage of stuff that they'll be better, more able to use, so that they can then learn to critically, they have something that they can actually, if you just look at the crap that comes up in the first 3 pages, you can be as critical as you want, you will never get anywhere. Okay? You need something to get by to. So we have kind of a branding on one side and a critical thinking training on the other. One is labeling, one is education, one is marketing, one is the dynamic of the argument itself, or the discourse and so on. So.
And they're also conflicting in some way.
And they're totally conflicting.
Yes.
And we have to do both.
Yeah.
But there's also the point that a lot of people, are, by the time they, maybe are reading your blogs, are beyond the point of wanting to be paying attention, being trained into critical thinking, or paying attention to those cues. And so this is an issue not necessarily for blogging per se, but maybe for bloggers to get involved in having influence on science curriculum and educational curriculum at the K level, from the very beginning. I mean, if you, it's easier to teach someone critical thinking if you just allow them to continue thinking critically, like asking all the questions they ask when they're a child.
I think it's okay to establish the voices that we have as authorities on something. I don't see things quite as doom and gloom. Actually, in the last year, we've made quite a remarkable amount of progress. For the first time in Society for Neuroscience tweeted from their meeting. There are academic societies that have podcasts. There are individual academic societies who are attempting to use blogs through the department programs. And I see the one big barrier is that, one, a lot of them don't understand how to use the technology in a very savvy way. And I actually first met Dr. Kiki at Experimental Biology a couple of years ago, and she actually was one of the people who encouraged me to start blogging so you all can blame her.